Hey, sixth grade. We are back to continue our story of Rama and Ramayana, the divine loophole. Today, we're going to be starting with the deeds of Rama, and we're going to read all the way to Act 2 Jungle Drama. So, let's begin our first read of Deeds of Rama. Rama and Lakshman were inseparable. As they grew toward adulthood, they were both recruited by an old sage, a Brahma rishi named Vishvamitra, who could see into the past and future and predicted a special mission for the duo. The rishi, a high level of Brahma rishi, or sage, wasted no time and began training his young recruits on how to harness the Devastras, or weapons of the gods. He also taught them divine mantras and asanas that gave the young warriors profound strength and mental focus. One day during their trainings, they visited Vishwamitra's ashram only to find that it was plagued by a demon named Tataka. The rishi explained that due to his vow of nonviolence, he could not take up arms against the demon. Instinctively, Rama drew back his bow, and the disrespectful demon was soon vanquished. As Vishvamitra performed last rites for the slain demon, he explained that Rama's actions that day would have ramifications in the future and cautioned him to always be mindful of his duty. Wow, that was quite a chapter. We met some characters, we were in a new setting, and there was a lot of action. But more than that, there was also a lot of vocabulary that I am not familiar with. So, when we're reading a complicated text like this, we will probably want to go back and reread at least 2 or 3 times. The first read is just to get the understanding of what's happening, meet the characters, get the setting, the action. The next time we read, we're going to want to read for things like information and words that we don't know. And that's what we're going to go back and read for this time. So as I reread this, I'm going to underline words that I'm not that familiar with. So let's just incorporate this as one of our new practices. When we're reading new books, there are going to be new vocabulary words, and we're going to have to recognize and get to know them. So let's start here. Rama and Lakshman were inseparable. Well, that's a good word to start with, inseparable. It's got a prefix, it's got a suffix, and it's got a root word. Inseparable. Inseparable. As they grew toward adulthood, they were both recruited by an old sage. I'm going to underline recruited. By an old sage, a Brahma rishi named Vishvamitra, well, that's his name, who could see in the past and future and predicted a special mission for the duo. The rishi, I'm going to underline that one, a high level of Brahma rishi or sage. So that gives me a little definition. It's a high level of Brahma rishi, or otherwise known as a sage. But sage was one of the words I underlined, so I'm probably going to have to look that one up too. Wasted no time and began training his young recruits on how to harness the Devastras, or weapons of the gods. That's the definition right there in the book. Devastras means weapons of the gods. He also taught them the divine mantras and asanas that gave the young warriors profound strength and mental focus. One day during their training, they visited Vishvamitra's ashram, only to find that it was plagued by a demon named Tataka. The rishi explained that due to the vow of non-violence, he could not take up arms. I'm going to underline non-violence. I know what violence is, but what's non-violence? Got a prefix, non. He could not take up arms against the demon. Instinctively, that's a big word, instinctively, Rama drew back his bow, and the disrespectful demon was soon vanquished. As Vishvamitra performed last rites for the slain demon, he explained, I'm going to underline slain, he explained that Rama's action that day would have ramifications, that's a good one, ramifications, in the future, and cautioned him to always be mindful of his duty. Wow, there were a lot of words in this chapter that I need to look up so I can better understand what this chapter is talking about. And that would lead me to my third read. The main idea or the main gist of what this chapter is trying to tell me. Let's keep going, and as we read today, we are going to be underlining new and unfamiliar words. And there's Rama vanquishing the demon. Break a bow, tie the knot. Before returning his two pupils to their kingdom, the rishi had another vision, which led him to travel with the princes to the neighboring kingdom where an auspicious test was being conducted. The challenge was to lift the bow of Shiva, a feat that only a god could accomplish. After hundreds of noble warriors tried and failed, Vishwamitra politely asked Rama to try. In a single motion, the blue prince placed his hand on the bow and lifted it high over his head. He quickly strung the bow, but as he pulled it back, it snapped and broke into pieces. Luckily, this accident was considered a miracle and was cause for a great celebration, as whoever was able to lift the bow would also win the hand. I'm going to underline that. It's an idiom. It doesn't actually mean to win a hand. It means to get married. Would also win the hand of Princess Sita, who was actually an avatara of the goddess Lakshmi. So, all right. Rama was able to lift the bow and break it, and he won the hand in marriage of Princess Sita. And there he is, snapping the bow. And there he is, getting married. Happy day. Rama and Sita. Sita's father immediately dispatched, underline that word, dispatched, his fastest messengers to Rama's kingdom to report the good news and to invite his royal court to a wedding. Upon hearing the announcement, Rama's father and his three queens made their way to the neighboring kingdom, accompanied by a grand procession. All of the guests watched as the enchanting princess placed a garland of flowers around Rama's neck, and together they circled a ceremonial fire 7 times. Thus they were married, and both kingdoms rejoiced. Rama's father was so pleased that he announced his retirement and proudly declared Rama and Sita the new king and queen. The royal couple lived happily ever after. Well, not quite. Okay, so Rama got married and became the new king, but something's going to go wrong. Exile. I'm going to underline that word. It's an important word because it's the title of the chapter. I better know what that means. Kaikiya, one of Rama's stepmothers, decided that her own son Bharata should be the next king and hatched a plot to do away with the blue prince. The jealous queen wasn't violent, but she was manipulative and reminded the king of the 2 wishes he had granted her for saving his life in battle. The crafty queen immediately spoke her wishes and demanded that Bharata be made the new king and that Rama be exiled to the jungle for 14 years. Despite his love for his favorite son, the king was a man of his word and honored his promise to the queen. Rama was stripped of his crown at once and commanded by his father to be exiled from the kingdom. Well, whatever exiled means, I don't think it's good because he was stripped of his crown and, yeah, he was commanded to be exiled from the kingdom. All right. So Rama's leaving the kingdom because his stepmother wants her own son to be the king. She called in a promise. So Rama calmly accepted his fate and headed out for the jungle. Fortunately, the prince wasn't alone, for both Sita and Lakshman were at his side. Sadly, soon afterward, this chapter of Rama's youth came to a close when his father, consumed by guilt, died of a broken heart. Oh, no. Not only is he exiled, but his father dies. Sad, terrible. But at least he's got his wife and his brother. They're going to stay by his side. Royal rescue. Eventually, the three reached a forest called Chitrakuta, where luckily there was no sign of demons. But before they could settle in, Lakshman spotted a royal procession led by Bharata, who had returned home from a neighboring kingdom after hearing news of his father's death. He was horrified to find that his mother had banished Rama from the kingdom. Rama was happy to see his stepbrother, who fell at his feet and begged him to return to the throne. But Rama would never break a promise or disobey the order of his father. Bharata was amazed with Rama's integrity and was more certain than ever that Rama was the rightful king. Bharata announced that if Rama could not be king, then no one would be king. And he then politely removed Rama's sandals and explained that he would place them upon the throne where they would wait for the true king to return. Wow, what a loyal brother. He's going to hold Rama's place. He said, I don't want to be king. You're the king. I'm going to take your sandals and I'm going to put them on the throne, and they're going to be here for when you get back after 14 years. Sacred shoes. I'm going to underline sacred. I want to make sure I know what that means because it's in the title. Under a cloud of gloom, Bharata returned to his kingdom and kept to his word. He placed Rama's sandals upon the empty throne to act as a symbol of Rama's rule. Bharata, Shatrunga then left their court and began their own exile. Determined to wait out the 14 years until Rama could return, swindled out of his kingdom by a jealous queen and stripped of his sandals by her guilt-ridden son, Rama prepared himself for a rough road ahead. Well, he's going shoeless into the jungle. And that is where we end. That is the end of Act 1. And we will continue with Act 2, Jungle Drama. But just to recap a little bit, going back to the beginning, just a little summarization over what we just read. It's always good to summarize, to retell the story that you just read, so you know that you understand what you're reading. So it started here at the beginning, the deeds of Rama and Lakshman getting trained by Vishvamitra, and they were learning all kinds of skills. And then a demon came in and was bothering Vishvamitra's ashram. So Rama killed that demon. He vanquished the demon. On his way home, Vishvamitra stopped at a competition to lift the bow of Shiva. Only a god accomplished this, and Rama was able to do it. Of course, he's the avatar of Vishnu, so he is actually a god. Might be a little confusing, but remember, he's blue, like Vishnu. So he broke the bow, and he was able to marry Sita, the princess. So happy. His father was happy. They had a wedding. His father retired, made him the king, but Rama had a jealous stepmother, and she exiled him. And he had to go into the forest for 14 years because she wanted her son to be the king. Rama accepted his fate. He agreed, he obeyed, because he would never disobey his father. But he had his wife and his brother to go along with him. Unfortunately, his father died of a broken heart. And so on his way out of the kingdom, Rama bumped into his stepbrother Bharata, who was coming back because he heard about the death of their father. And Bharata said, "No, you're the king. I'm not going to be the king. You're going to be the king. I'm taking your sandals. I'm putting them on the throne. They're going to be waiting here for you when you get back, and you will be the king." And so Rama, shoeless, set off to the jungle to live out his 14 years of exile. And that is where we end for today.